Okay, welcome to Accelerated Math. Write imaginary numbers. BI, imagine that. Okay, this BI thing, you might be like, what is BI? Do you remember A plus BI, where A was the real component of the number, kind of like 5 is a real number, plus maybe 7i, where BI is the imaginary portion of the number. Okay, so that's all they're asking for on this, is to get it into this imaginary format. So they're focused on this part. There is no real component to this, and they just want you to get in that format. Now, you might be kind of going, what is this I thing? If you remember, well, let me show you on this. If you just try to do this, and you grab your calculator, haha, pretty sweet, huh? All right, if you grab your calculator, do square root of negative 24, you'll see that I'm going to get, if I hit enter correctly, I'm going to get a domain error. Okay, now domain is an input. Remember that domain and range, input and output. Domain is an input, and it's basically saying there's an input error here. Calculator won't deal properly with the square root of negative 24. So we got an issue here. Here's how we're going to handle it. We're going to separate it. We're going to say that the square root of 24 times the square root of negative 1 is the same thing as the square root of negative 24. This square root of negative 1, if you remember, we're going to call that the imaginary number, I. Alright, we had an I facts chart, so the square root of negative 1 is defined as I. Then we can continue with this square root of 24. We can just start factoring it like you used to back in 8th grade. 2, 12, that goes down to 2 and 6. 6 goes to 2 and 3. Do you remember this? Getting it down to all prime factors and finding pairs, like a pair of 2's that would get out. The 2 and the 3 didn't have any pairs that were alike, so they had to stay in there and get multiplied. So this was the same thing as 2 on the square root of 6. And then we still have that I, and we're going to drop that I back in here. It's on the outside. It got out. It's a replacement, a complete replacement of the square root of negative 1. Alright, so that's one way to get the answer. So the answer is 2I on the square root of 6. But what I want to suggest is, let me clear this screen. Alright, let me clear that screen. What I want to suggest to you is, when you see something like this, immediately get the negative out of there as an I. That's on the outside. Now I've still got square root of 24. Then I know you can do that one by hand, but there are going to be some other ones that are going to be more difficult. Take your calculator and do second square root 24 and enter. Of course, it might help if I clear it. Clear that. Second square root 24 without the negative. Get the answer from the calculator, 2 on the square root of 6. As soon as I have that, then I know I've already got the I out of there, so the I stays on the outside, and that 2 square root of 6. See how I kind of put that I right in the middle of it? But the 2 is out there, and that. Okay, so B is still our answer. All right, let's go to the next one. Given expressions, square root of 200. As soon as I see that negative, that's going to be an I on the outside, and square root of 200. I don't even really feel like I need the calculator for this one, but I could use it. That's 2 times 100. What's the square root of 100? Well, it's 10. So we got 10 I, and the square root of 2, that's as simple as that one's going to get, so 10I on the square root of 2. Alright, I would encourage you to use that calculator if you're uncomfortable with some of the stuff. Now here's a number. I don't know. I don't feel like factoring that. 567, I don't know what goes into that. So I'm going to get the negative out as an I. I still have square root of 567. I grab my calculator. I'm going to clear it. Second square root 567. Enter. Let the calculator do the work for me on that. 9 on the square root of 7. Therefore, it's 9 square root of 7. That I is usually going to be right in between there. So 9I square root of 7. Occasionally you're going to see it written like this, 9 square root of 7 with an I over here. What's critical is that you notice that the I is on the outside of the square root. You're never going to see the I on the inside, so you know that's not the answer. So anyway, 9I square root of 7, letter A, and that's it for this one. Give it a shot, rewind if you need to, but get those practices done and be ready for the test on this one and move on to your next subject. Thanks.